So I'm Alec Walker, and I was about to say sitting here with Jim Claunch. Jim Claunch is sitting somewhere else because everyone's remote right now. And we're going to go over some tips and tricks from working from home and put it all in the context of COVID-19 and what's happening in the energy industry. So our overall message here is to encourage people to create their own sense of normalcy. And if you do this deliberately, then you can overcome fear for yourself and for your family. You can optimize your time so that you're doing the best work that you possibly can while you're working from home in your new sense of normalcy. And you can adapt at the same time using your sense of normalcy to the changing oil and gas industry. Some would say the changed oil and gas industry. So because this is an oil and gas presentation, it's always good to start with a safety moment and the topic of safety generally. And what everybody has in mind right now is COVID-19. So I'm not a healthcare professional and I don't want to give really specific advice. But what I do want to say is the oil and gas industry is really good traditionally at when recognizing that there are human risk situations like health or safety risks for people. Listening to the professionals. So we find the people who really know what they're talking about and know what the risks are. And when they set up protocols and give us advice, we tend to have a proactive, conservative, and safety first culture. And I think we should bring that same culture to handling COVID-19, even though we're not necessarily at the workplace when we're dealing with this. And the reason why I say that is this is a screenshot I took of just live updates from cases of COVID-19 in Texas the day before we ran the webinar at 5 p.m. And then almost 24 hours later, I took another screenshot and we see that the number of confirmed cases had gone way up. I also, have been getting alerts like this. This is a serious issue, this virus. So we shouldn't take it lightly and we shouldn't plan on it ending necessarily super soon. Here's an epidemic calculator that shows COVID-19 fatalities, hospitalizations, infections, and exposed over time. And this epidemic calculator has been tuned to COVID-19. And what we see here is, well, let's see if I drag the population to resemble the US population, something like that. If I drag this forward and backward, this is essentially how effective the United States is doing at maintaining social distance. So if I drag it forward, we're doing a better job, and you notice that the numbers on the left-hand side, and in particular that fatality number, the sum of all the fatalities on the bottom left there, goes down. If we do a worse job, it goes way up. So we really owe it to ourselves and our community to do a good job with that. So that's all just to say that we are stuck at home. So, okay, if we're at home, how do we be safe? What's the right way to be safe working from home? So this is the mantra that a lot of folks are adopting. I think it's a good one. Eliminate, substitute, redesign, and review. So when I say eliminate, I'm talking about hazards, and typical work from home hazards involve tripping and spilling. So we're working from a sort of temporary desk that maybe we've set up and we run extension cords over carpets. Like think about running, additional extension cords so that there's no tripping hazard and going under a carpet. If you're setting your coffee down on a stack of books because you're dealing with a smaller desk than usual, think about putting the coffee in a designated spot so you don't spill it. If you do spill a drink and you spill it on electronics, there's a risk of a shock or of a fire. So think about that and position accordingly. If there is a fire, know how to exit and talk about that with your family, as everyone is also working from home in your family. So next up, substitute. This is about substituting for faults. And when I say faults, I mean faulty equipment. So you're using equipment as you work from home that you might not have been using before. It's a good idea to have lighting behind the screen that you're working on be brighter than the screen's light. And typically that means that you have to rearrange lamps and set up some new lighting so that you're not hurting your eyes looking at your screen at home. Check the cords, make sure they're not frayed. you're sitting in a chair that's kind of a temporary chair, think about that. You might be suboptimal there, and it could cause some long-term issues. If you're using an old monitor that's flickering, see about substituting that out. And next up, redesign. We're talking about redesigning your space ergonomically. So this is the correct posture when you're sitting and working for long periods. Notice all the right angles. For me, at least, this is kind of aspirational. I have to remind myself to sit up and think about it periodically to see if I'm doing a good job. But it makes a difference to keep this in mind and to readjust over time. So you've got elbows at right angles, and your hips are at right angles, your knees are right angles, your feet are on the floor, and your neck is straight. Your monitor is arm's length away, and the top of the monitor is level with the top of your eyes. And another thing, this comes up a lot with ergonomics, if you hold your hand out straight and then let your fingers relax, you notice that your wrist stays pretty straight. That's the right typing position. You shouldn't be bending your wrist backwards a lot while typing or forwards a lot while typing. That's how you get carpal tunnel syndrome and have joint pain as time goes on. So then finally, review. The concept is to review these 4 categories habitually. And so the review becomes part of your new norm, and you're constantly able to adjust and adapt, and you maintain control, and you feel better about yourself, and you do better work at home in a safe way. So that's the mantra: eliminate, substitute, redesign, and review. So last thing I'll say about safety here before we start talking about the next section is about family safety. And something that a lot of folks are doing that works pretty well right now is having family meetings periodically. During the family meeting, you talk about 3 different things. You talk about what's happening in the world and in the industry. And there's lots of updates on both. So you can kind of stay informed and think about how you talk about your family, talk to your family about what's happening. You can focus on what it means for each family member's goals as the next step. So what's everybody thinking about kind of longer term is their goal given what's happening, and how those goals are shaped by what's happening. And then you come up with a specific plan between now and the next time you have the meeting, not just for you, but also for the others in your family. And kids like this a lot because they're working from, or doing school from home, and they've got a virtual backpack or something. It's kind of cool to feel like they're on a mission with their parents. You guys all have your deliveries by a certain time. So you can think about that. This kind of practice here is kind of like that old saying about firewood. So firewood warms you 3 times: when you chop it, when you carry it, and then when you burn it. And I think these meetings kind of help you because they help you in 3 ways. They help you set up a sense of camaraderie that you used to have at work. And, instead of feeling isolated at home, you have that camaraderie. You feel accountable because you've set some goals. And that also gives you, again, a better sense of normalcy. You can check in periodically with everybody, even though things are changing and kind of chaotic, you're on top of that, and you know what to do, and you know how to adapt. And when you create that sense of normalcy with others, that camaraderie is really powerful and overcomes the fear. So when you schedule these meetings, it's kind of up to you, your family size, how old the different members are. You could try it once a week and then adjust for longer durations in between meetings, or have them more frequently. So totally up to you there. All right, so the next section here, moving on from safety and COVID-19 into the next section, we're talking about helpful tools. And there's so much to talk about here, and some of it is subjective. So rather than just like tell you what I think is best, which would take a really long time, instead I'm going to introduce categories and give a couple of examples. And the goal is to get people talking about these tools. And the tools and their categories are work from home optimization tools. So you used to do your work a certain way. That's become harder because you're working from home. What are the kinds of tools, and how can you explore them? So the basics, essential technologies. Of course, you got to have internet and a computer. If you're watching this video, ideally you have both of those things already. If you're still working with a team, you got to have email, and you got to have a file repository set up. So email, pretty straightforward. There's 2 ways to do it. You can have a downloaded app like Outlook, or you can have your email on a web browser. Web browsers allow you to integrate other things on the web with your email, so that is becoming more preferred these days. And file repositories are extremely helpful. It works just like having a folder that you open on your computer, except you open that folder in a web browser. You can create subfolders and drag and drop things, look around at files and open different files. And what it prevents is, let's say that you're working with somebody else, and you send them a file, and then they start working on that file. At this point, you have 3 copies of that same file. That's going to lead to some confusion and cause you to have to reconcile across the different versions later on. You avoid all of that if you store the file in a central repository that everybody has access to. This might be review for some. Most companies have something like this set up in the oil and gas industry, but often it's locked behind a VPN. If you don't have access to your company's VPN right now or through the VPN, that probably means you can't get to your email or your file repositories. That's bad. Given what's going on right now, it's advisable to be as useful to your company as you can be, even when you're working from home in kind of a suboptimal way. So do what it takes to get that VPN set up. If you don't know who to call in IT and you can't find that information, call people in your company and ask around until you get somebody. This is a good priority here. So other categories of helpful tools just beyond the basics. I thought of 4 categories here, 4 general categories. There's communication, the workplace itself, there's wellness, and then there's community. So for communication, I can think of 3 subcategories of communication: planning, executing, and keeping track. So if you're planning something and if you're executing something, you often work with other people across tools that kind of overlap in both of those phases. So there's scheduling software. Traditionally, in an office environment, you can just go knock on somebody's door and see when they're free, or you interact with them in the hallway or in the elevator. You can kind of get a sense when somebody's free. It's harder to do that when everyone's remote. Are they busy right now? Are they busy next week? You can use apps like Calendly. That's one example. There's tons of them. I'm not necessarily recommending Calendly. And you set up a link that people can see and access to schedule time on your calendar. So you're in control of when they have opportunities to schedule. That works pretty well. And of course, there's video conferencing software. Most companies have this kind of thing set up through Teams or Skype or something newer like Zoom or GoToMeeting. And those are really helpful because you can see people, and when you talk to them, you get a little bit of that workplace camaraderie back, and you can get a lot done when you're having real discussions face to face, even if it's virtual, as compared to over email. So hand in hand with video conferencing software, I recommend shared notes software, whether this is just a document that's in your repository that you're both looking at and you're typing into simultaneously as you're taking notes during the meeting on the video call, or some kind of special software that is meant to be just for taking notes during meetings. The way I do it is I use Google Sheets, and everything that we talk about during the meeting is in black, and then when people come in and add notes afterward, they each have a color, so you can kind of see who wrote what later and how things were getting resolved. Helps to keep track of what's going on in the meeting after the meeting's done. So last here is chat software. Justification for chat software versus email is that if you have something more urgent but less formal, you use chat software. It's almost like a video call, but you don't have to schedule it and set it up. You just send a quick message, kind of like a text message. So there's a lot of examples of chat software. Slack is a really popular one. Yammer, Jabber, there's a whole bunch of these. So here's an example. Somebody is setting up a Slack channel to figure out how to help neighbors and what neighbors need help during this COVID-19 crisis. That's planning and executing. Last on communication is keeping track. So you're trying to work on stuff and get stuff done with teams. How do you keep track of progress? I think checklist software is really helpful here. This is Asana. There's also Airtable. There's a bunch of them, a bunch of these kinds of apps that let you, set up checklists, share them with others, break them down into parts, and keep track of progress, so you know when someone's a bottleneck or when you're a bottleneck and that kind of thing. So really encourage you to start exploring these tools. And the best way to do that is to talk to other people in the industry who are using them. Then you can learn how do they get access and how do you clear that with your company and what kinds of strategies work. If you're proactive in this, then you're being very helpful to your company, and companies need people who are being really helpful right now. So next up is workplace. So what are some tools that help with the workplace? I thought of two categories. One is about eliminating background noise, and maybe I should have set that up because I've got a neighbor with a noisy dog right now. I didn't set it up for this call though. So crisp.ai is an example. It eliminates the noise that you and others hear that's background noise without you having to mute yourself while you're talking. That's pretty cool. The next up is screen recording. So it used to be that if you wanted to give a presentation, you could just pull people in and show them, hey, here's how I'm doing this, or hey, I want to look over your shoulder and see how you're working. It's harder to do that remotely, so a lot of people are starting to record their screens and then share what they did so others can see and watch the video, kind of like what we're doing right now. So there's built-in tools for this in Windows and in Mac in the latest operating systems. So Windows, the app is actually the Xbox app. Xbox is like a entertainment system, but you got an app on Windows. You can open it up and click the record button. It'll start recording your screen and it'll save it as a file on your computer. For Mac, you can do the same thing with QuickTime. These are built-in softwares. You can use conferencing software often to record your screen. That's what we're doing right now using GoToMeeting. You can edit videos for free if you create a YouTube account, or you can get a standalone editor if you want to get something that goes behind your firewall and is more secure. Camtasia is one example. There's tons of these. Next up is wellness. So two types of wellness, I think. There's physical health and there's mental health. And these are important when you're working from home, just like they're important at any other time. So got to pay attention to them, and it's a little harder sometimes to do all the same routines that you used to because now you're stuck at home. So to stay physically healthy, there's exercise software. You can download apps, or what I like to do sometimes is just go on YouTube and search for exercise classes and press play and see if I can follow along. That kind of keeps you guessing too. There's stretch software. So in addition to exercise, you stay limber and stretch. There's apps. You can also watch YouTube videos for that. Then there's lighting software. If you're at your computer all day and you're at your computer late into the night, it helps to adjust the colors that your screen uses so that you don't throw off your circadian rhythm and have bad sleep. So there's some nifty apps like Flux that will change the colors of your screen depending on what time it is and when you want to go to sleep and when you want to wake up. So that's physical health. Next up, mental health. It's meditation. There's a lot more science backing meditation these days. What popular app is called Headspace. And notice Headspace and others, a lot of the apps that we've talked about, not just in the wellness space, are in reaction to the COVID-19 crisis, offering free support or free demos or discounts. So it's a good time to be exploring these kinds of things. So you can try meditating during the day and see if it works for you. Sleep apps. There's one called Sleep Cycle that tracks when you're in REM sleep and when you were kind of more awake and maybe you woke up during the night. How long were your sleep total? What's your overall quality? Some useful stuff there. On wellness, I guess we just did that. So on to community. I think there's two kinds of community-based apps that are really worth exploring here. One is location-based and the other is industry-based. So we have our immediate family kind of community. We have our neighbors and our geographic community, and then we have our workplace community. And you're probably with some amount of family, or hopefully you're talking to family on the phone or video calls. But for your neighbors geographically, you can use apps like Nextdoor, where you can chat either anonymously or otherwise with your neighbors and ask questions and get advice and let people know how you can help them out and that sort of thing. So that can be very therapeutic at a time like this. And then there's industry-based. And I haven't found any good industry-wide tools to help the oil and gas community when dealing with the COVID-19 crisis and the oil oil industry crisis. So I've created one here at this link. So it's bit.ly/Inly Slack. It's a Slack channel where we've been posting tons of resources and setting up groups where people can talk about the different kinds of challenges and share tips and tricks, kind of like on this video. So if you follow that link, it'll ask you for your email address. You enter it in, click on verify your email, then it'll send you a link that you click on in your email. And when you click on that link, you're good to go. You're already in the Slack group. So it's pretty easy to set up. This is what it looks like when you get there. You can introduce yourself and start checking out the resources. So that was kind of a shotgun approach. We talked a lot about categories. I gave a few examples just kind of to get you thinking. The goal here is to start talking about this and to set aside time as you're creating your sense of normalcy to explore these things and figure out what works for you. And there's going to be some transition time before you kind of fall into place with the tools that you like, but continue to explore them and adapt. And I think that'll be really useful, not just now, but also with how the industry is sort of shaping up to look following the crisis.